The reunion may have shed some light on what happened off-camera at Friends, but there's still a lot we don't know. Until now. We're bringing you all the unexpected rules that the cast of Friends had to follow on set. We've got all the details on life as a friend, from having to act out plots they hated to walking off set amid emotional turmoil. As an added treat, we've also uncovered the rule that explains why Ross and Rachel's romance never left the screen. Be prepared to work really hard. Took a hell of a lot of work to make 236 episodes of Friends. Each one took at least 5 hours to film, and that's without time for writing, rehearsing, or the cast's legendary pre-filming huddle. Co-creator David Crane admitted, "Our hours were crazy. There were so many mornings when we were finishing the rewrites." When he says mornings, he means early. It wasn't unusual for the team to still be busy at 1 or 2 a.m. That's why they occasionally needed to change the audience during filming. After midnight, the studio audience was too tired to laugh. As co-creator Martha Kaufman explained, "We knew we had to listen to the audience. Their silence tells you a lot." Here's where it gets really interesting. Despite the audience being vital to the show, they weren't always there. Jennifer Aniston once explained, "We always remove the audience for the cliffhangers because, obviously, you don't want to spoil it. However, the long hours made it really hard for the cast to memorize their lines, so they got a little creative." Courtney Cox used to write her lines on Monica's kitchen table or hide her scripts on the set in a fruit bowl or cookie jar. For a little while, because she was busted by one of her co-stars.
Does Courtney still have her lines written on the table?
When Matt LeBlanc found out about Courtney's habit, he pranked her. The actor recalled, "Before we shot, I erased it all. She got so mad at me, but she shouldn't have. That's breaking the second rule. Trust the casting decisions." That reunion did more than hit us with nostalgia. It gave us never-before-seen insights. For example, Friends was inspired by the lives of the co-creators, David Crane and Martha Kaufman, which is why they had very specific ideas in mind for casting. Producer Kevin Bright admitted, "We didn't have a backup. There wasn't a second Rachel. There wasn't a second Chandler. There wasn't a second Ross or Phoebe. We didn't go in with anybody else." It was a tense time. While shooting the pilot, Jennifer Aniston was tied to another show. Thankfully, she managed to get out of that commitment, or Friends could have looked very different. It doesn't end there. Did you know that Phoebe and Chandler were originally supporting characters to a group of 4 friends? Or that Monica and Joey were supposed to have a romance? So how the heck did we end up with a show featuring 6 friends, with Ross and Rachel handling the love story? The actors were just that good. Martha explained that the chemistry on set is thanks to the cast. She admitted that Courtney is just as neat and precise as Monica, while Chandler's sarcastic humor was 100% based on Matthew Perry's real-life awkwardness. Lisa Kudrow's interpretation of her character also led to a surprising change because Phoebe was supposed to be goth. But just because the actors were the perfect people for their roles doesn't mean it was a cakewalk. In the final season, Jennifer actually considered not renewing her contract. It wasn't because of the role. The actress had some personal issues. Even though she opened up about her troubles during the special, we nearly didn't get to hear about it because Jennifer walked off the reunion set too. But not in the way you might think. The actress told Hollywood Reporter, "I hadn't thought about what was going on the last time I was actually here. It was all very jarring, with cameras everywhere and I'm already emotional, so I had to walk out at certain points. Luckily for us, instead of abandoning the reunion, Jennifer embraced the third set rule instead. Always do what you're told." We may have loved every single scene and episode from Friends, but the cast wasn't always as impressed. Sadly, they just had to grin and bear it if they didn't like a scene. That's the nature of a job. Surprisingly, this included the show's iconic intro sequence. What ended as a few seconds of hilarious dancing around a fountain actually took hours of awkward dancing in ice-cold water, and the cast wasn't having as much fun as you'd think from their smiles. Jennifer once admitted, "We all felt it was a little, I don't know, dancing in a pond or like a fountain felt a little odd." That was just the start. Since the finale, the actors have slowly opened up about the stories they didn't like, and at the top of the list is the romance between Joey and Rachel. The show's producer admitted that this plot was the cause of a lot of conflict. Kevin elaborated, "The cast revolted when they read the first script on it. No, Joey would never do this to Ross. That almost didn't happen." The rest of their horror stories are a little more surprising. Lisa Kudrow, for example, hated working on any scenes involving Chandler and Joey's pet birds because the actress has a very real phobia of birds. She just had to act through her fear. But this wasn't the first time Lisa almost broke this rule. Lisa also disliked that Phoebe played guitar and had hoped to get this instrument changed to bongos. But the writers refused, and in protest, Lisa never learned to play the guitar, which is why Phoebe plays so, well, badly. The cast didn't just have to film the occasional scene they weren't invested in, they also had to learn to deal with disappointment in other ways, like pitching ideas that were rejected. For example, Matt LeBlanc once admitted that he and Lisa Kudrow had an idea for the writers. He explained, "We actually pitched the idea that Joey and Phoebe had been having casual sex the entire time. We'd go back and shoot the scenes, and just before a moment that everyone recognizes, Joey and Phoebe come out of a broom closet together. Only the writers said no, calling it unrealistic." Which brings us to our next rule: draw inspiration from life. One thing that emerged from the Friends reunion special was that this show was definitely a product of its time. In the 27 years since it first aired, it's been criticized as being too heteronormative and white. But as the creators explained, none of that was intentional. In fact, they even admitted that they could never write a show like it today. They felt it would be boring, with all the characters constantly on social media, and the fact that it has no set story in the pilot wouldn't work in these times. But that doesn't mean the show was totally unrealistic either. In fact, realism is exactly what forced the writers to delete a scene from Monica and Chandler's honeymoon. The competition we see between them and another couple to get ahead in airport queues was actually a backup. The original scene was cut as it involved Chandler joking about a bomb on the plane. Because the episode was filmed so soon after the horrible events of 9/11, the writers didn't want to use that joke and went for the friendly competition instead. But they did include a small nod to the tragedy and the team of people who helped the survivors. Of course, the best way to ensure something is realistic is to draw inspiration from real events. You might be surprised to learn that Friends fully embraced the idea of art imitating life. And it goes beyond writing Lisa Kudrow's pregnancy into the show or basing Chandler's best speeches on things the actor actually said. There were darker moments too. Just ask Courtney Cox. Like the character she played on screen, the actress and her husband had fertility issues. Courtney explained, "I remember one time I just had a miscarriage and Rachel was giving birth. It was that same time. Oh my God, it was terrible having to be funny." But she's not the only one who had to deal with pain on set. Can you believe that the one time the cast didn't start a workday with their famous group huddle, the unthinkable happened?
Bad things happen when we did not huddle.
Yeah.
People got injured.
You'll find out about it, I think, in the special.
In the special, you'll find out all
about it. There's only one show we didn't do a huddle for, and someone got seriously hurt.
Yes, they did.
When Joey should have been fighting Chandler for a spot on a chair, Matt LeBlanc got a little too enthusiastic and tripped over a coffee table. As the girls explain,
Mr. LeBlanc,
his arm fell out.
out of his body.
Dislocated his shoulder.
it's sweet that his co-stars were still concerned about the injury nearly 2 decades later. Of course, if you consider that they spent so many years following the next rule, that's not really surprising. Keep the love alive off screen. Without the chemistry between the cast, Friends would just be a group of people with a caffeine addiction. The showrunners were so adamant that in order for the friendships on screen to be believable, they had to be real. So the cast spent a lot of time bonding, starting with their famous trip to Vegas before they filmed the pilot. However, it was a little more difficult to keep the chemistry going with certain guest stars, especially if that guest is your ex-boo. That happened to Jennifer Aniston, who had to act alongside her ex of 3 years, Tate Donovan, when he landed the role of Rachel's love interest, Joshua. Despite how convincing they were on screen, it was a real pain for both actors. Tate admitted to Huffington Post that it was so awkward and horrible trying to romance his ex that he actually broke down in tears in his dressing room. Thankfully, there's no clue of any of those bad feelings in the couple's scenes together. Although Miss Aniston wasn't the only one who had trouble with this, one guest star in particular caused the entire cast to break this rule. It was Marcel, the monkey. David Schwimmer revealed that his efforts to bond with the animal were useless. He added, "The trainer won't let me bond with it. They're really, really possessive. It's like, don't touch or bond with the monkey." It's a bummer. Don't you just hate it when you don't get on with a colleague? Of course, the opposite scenario was just as dangerous and led to the creation of the most important rule for the cast of Friends: never hook up with your co-stars. When David Schwimmer and Jennifer Aniston attended the Friends reunion, they made a bombshell admission that had fans and some of the crew shook. They'd been crushing on each other in real life for years. Kevin Bright explained, "It was like, oh my God, they can't be acting like that. There's gotta be something." Everybody was suspicious that something was going on. Marta admitted that they had suspicions but never asked the two actors outright. So why didn't they act on these feelings? They couldn't, literally, because there was a set rule that prevented any romance between co-stars, ensuring the cast stayed friends and not friends with benefits. At least that's what Matthew Perry said, and it was all because of the show's director, Jim Burrows.
There was a rule that we had. It was really important to the six of us that we kept a friendship, that we were friends.
Yeah, we didn't want to jeopardize any of the great relationships and friendships we were forming and had established. So it was kind of an unspoken.
Now, we can't help wondering how different life and friends would have been if this rule had been broken. We need a spin-off that addresses this, don't you think? For even more Friends info, check out our other videos. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay awesome.